Number 9 says Yuri bought a pair of running shoes at a 25% discount sale for $48. What was the original price of the running shoes? Students typically mistake this one because of the 25%. The 25% was the discount price. Okay, so if we took 25% off of the original value, then we would get 48. So the key to this particular problem right here is to understand that 25% is the percent off. So 75% of the original price is what equals $48. And that's the super important thing to remember about this problem right here, is you've got 75% of the original price is what is equal to 48. So at this point, you divide both sides by 0.75. And your answer to this is going to be $64. Now, if you have trouble with the division, what you are doing is you have 48 and you are trying to determine how many times 75 points or 75 hundredths goes into 48. So the way that we do the multiplication on this is we move this decimal over 2 spots. And if we move that decimal over 2 spots, we're going to move this decimal over 2 spots. Okay, so we actually end up having 75 into 4,800. Okay, and 75 will not go into 48. So then we're going to see how many times does 78 go into 480. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to think about this 75 is about 80. It's not perfectly 80, but it's about 80. So how many times would 8 go into 48? And the answer to that is 6. So that is where we get our 6 from. Okay, 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 7 is 42, plus 3 is 45. Okay, at this point, we subtract. Okay, and then we say, how many times does 75 go into 300? And the answer to that is 4. And so our answer here is $64. So if the division here confuses you, be sure you look at that for the division. Okay, our next problem is linear, and it's find the equation of the line that contains the points 9, 3, and 19, negative 17. Okay, so in order to solve this problem, the first thing that we have to do is we have to find the slope. So the first step with this is to find our slope. Find our slope. So our slope, so first step, find slope. Okay, so our slope here is change in y over change in x. A lot of students prefer the y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, and that's fine. So what we're going to do is we are going to do 3. I'm starting with this point right here. I'm going to do 3 minus negative 17. Okay, 3 minus negative 17. And then I'm going to have 9 minus 19. 9 minus 19. 3 minus negative 17 becomes plus. So there I'm going to get 20. 9 minus 19 gives me negative 10. So my slope in this situation is negative 2. So my slope is negative 2. My second step is to plug my slope and either point into point slope form. Okay, and you had one like this on your test just recently. So hopefully you're remembering some of that. So my slope is negative 2, and I get to use either point. So I've got y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, the point that I'm going to use this point. So I have y minus 3. My slope was negative 2. And then I've got x minus 9. Okay? Now at this point, I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to put it in y equals mx plus b form. Okay? Y equals mx plus b form. So I've got y minus 3. I'm distributing my negative 2. So I have negative 2x plus 18. Negative 2 times negative 9 is positive 18. I add 3 to both sides, and I'm left with y equals negative 2x plus 21. Okay, so I have, and this is my final answer. Find the equation of the line determined by the 2 points, and I'm going to put my answer in slope-intercept form. So we are going to start the solving portion of the final exam. The difference between simplifying and solving is you've got your equal sign. So when you've got your equal sign, you are looking for a value for that variable. So we're not, there's an element of combining like terms when you were solving, but ultimately you were looking for a value or multiple values for that variable. So here's our first one, 3x to the third plus 21x squared minus 54x. Whenever you've got an x squared or an x to the third or an x to the fourth, you're always going to set that equal to 0. When you do that, my first suggestion is always to see if you can factor. That is going to be the best way to solve it. If you can factor, you're going to solve by factoring. So what I would encourage you to do is look for your GCF first. And there is a GCF in here. There's a 3 that goes into all of these, as well as an x that goes into all of these. So we are going to take out a 3x before we do anything else. Then we're going to have x squared plus 7x, and that is going to be minus 18. Okay, and then we're going to set that equal to 0. Now we can keep going. So we've got 3x, and then we're going to factor again. So we're looking for two numbers multiplied together that give us negative 18, and added together that give us positive 7. So two numbers added together give me positive 7. That's my sum. And multiplied together give me negative 18. Okay, and my two numbers are going to be positive 9 and negative 2. 9 plus negative 2 gives me 7. 9 times negative 2 gives me negative 18. So here are my numbers. So what I've got now is I've got my 3 factors. I have 3x, then I have x plus 9, and I have x minus 2. So my next step is I'm going to set each one of those equal to 0. So I have 3x equals 0. X plus 9 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, so for our first one, our first value here is 0. Okay, our second factor, I get x equals negative 9, and my third one, I'm going to get x equals 2. So the solutions to this problem right here are 0, negative 9, and positive 2. Those are the solutions. Okay. The next one that we are going to do, this is a rational equation. A rational equation. And when you are looking at a rational equation, the way that you solve a rational equation is you multiply each individual part by the LCD. So you've got to determine the LCD, and then once you've determined the LCD, you're going to multiply each part of the equation by that LCD. So the first thing I'm going to look at is this x minus 4. That is going to be part of our LCD. So we're going to have x minus 4. Okay. The next thing I'm going to look at is x minus 2. So that is another part. That's different than x minus 4. So I've got to have x minus 2 as part of my least common denominator as well. Now, in this particular problem, this is already simplified. We have x minus 2 and x minus 4. I'm sorry, it's already factored. The denominator is already factored. If this is not factored on your final exam, you need to factor it first. Now, in this situation, it is factored, but if it's not factored, factor it first. Okay, so now that we've determined our LCD is x minus 4 times x minus 2, we are going to use that and we are going to multiply that times each individual part of this. So I've got x minus 4 times x minus 2, and that is over 1. And I am multiplying that times my original part, which is 1 over x minus 4. Okay, that's my original part. Then I am adding that to my next expression in my rational equation. I've got x minus 4 times x minus 2, and that's over 1. And I am multiplying that times x over x minus 2. Then my final part of my equation, and I'm going to have to erase so that we have everything. Okay, I am multiplying times my LCD, which is x minus 2 times x minus 4. Okay, now I get to simplify out what's on the top and the bottom. So on my first one, I've got x minus 4 on the bottom and I've got x minus 4 on the top. So I'm left with 2x minus 2 and 1. So I have 1 times x minus 2. Okay, now for my next one, I've got x minus 2 and x minus 2. So I'm left with x minus 4 and x. So I have x times x minus 4. Okay, then on my last one, they both cancel out. So I'm actually just left with equals 2. So now we have x minus 2. I'm going to go ahead and square x squared. So I have x times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is 4x, and that equals 2. Now, what we have to do now is we have to solve this quadratic. So we're going to solve this quadratic. So I've got x squared. So I'm going to take that x squared right there. Okay. Then I've got x and negative 4x. So that's going to be minus 3x. Okay. Then I've got negative 2. And that equals 2. So I've got to get this equal to 0. I've got to get it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm left with x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Okay? Now at this point, because I've got it set equal to 0, I can go ahead and factor that. So my product is negative 4. Okay? My product is negative 4. And my sum is negative 3. Okay, so when I factor this, I am looking for two numbers multiplied together give me negative 4, and added together give me negative 3. So negative 4 times positive 1 is going to give me negative 4. Negative 4 plus positive 1 is going to give me negative 3. So that is equal to 0. So I've got x minus 4 is equal to 0, and x plus 1 is equal to 0. So I have x equals 4 and x equals negative 1. Now, you have to go back and look. It's super, super important that you go back and look for extraneous solutions or undefined values. Now, when I take 4 and I put it right here, I get 4 minus 4. 4 minus 4 is 0, and I'm not allowed to have 0 in the denominator. So that eliminates this possibility right here. That eliminates that possibility. So my only answer to this problem right here is negative 1. That's my only answer. Okay. So our next one, we have x squared minus 3x minus 15 equals x squared plus 9. So the first thing that I want to do, because I've got x squared, is I want to set it equal to 0. So the way that I start setting it equal to 0 is I go ahead and subtract that x squared from both sides, because I am trying to get it equal to 0. When I subtract x squared from both sides, my x squares cancel out. They're gone. So at that point, I am left with negative 3x minus 15 equals 9. Negative 3x minus 15 equals 9. At this point, it is no longer a quadratic. I don't have anything raised to the second power, so I don't need to set it equal to 0 anymore. What I need to do now is solve for x. I have a linear equation, so I'm going to solve for x. So I'm adding 15 to both sides. I get negative 3x equals 24. And when I divide by negative 3, I'm left with x equals negative 8. And that is the solution to this, is x is equal negative 8. Okay? Okay, number 14. Number 14 is we have 5x squared plus 4 equals 14x plus 7. Because we've got an x squared right here, the first step is we are going to move towards getting it by itself. We're going to move towards getting it by itself. So, we are going, or I'm sorry. I was looking at something else in the practice final. So let me start over. We have 5x squared plus 4 equals 14x plus 7. What we want to do here is we want to get it set equal to 0. The reason that we want to get it set equal to 0 is because we have something squared. We have something squared. So I am going to do, I'm going to subtract 14x from both sides. Okay, I do not have anything on the left-hand side to combine with that. So I have 5x squared minus 14x plus 4. And then my next step is to subtract 7. So I have 5x squared minus 14x minus 3 equals 0. So at this point, we have to factor. So I have a positive 5 and a negative 3. So my product for this is negative 15. And my sum for this is negative 14. Okay? 5x squared minus 14x minus 3. 5, the way I get my product is I multiply 5 times negative 3. And my sum is right here, is negative 14. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together give me negative 15, added together give me negative 14. And so those two numbers are going to be negative 15 and positive 1. Negative 15 times 1 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 1 is negative 14. So I have to split this. So I have 5x squared minus 15x plus 1x minus 3. Okay, I take 5x out of the first part, and I'm left with x minus 3. I don't have anything that I can take out of the second one. So remember, when that happens, I'm taking out a positive 1. So I have 5x plus 1 times x minus 3. I set each one of those equals to 0. So I have 5x plus 1 equals 0. And x minus 3 equals 0. So as I solve each of these, I end up with x is equal to negative 1/5 and x is equal to 3. And so both of those are my answer to number 14. Next, we are looking at number 15. Number 15 is 2x squared minus 3x equals 5. Always, we're going to set it equal to 0. 2x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Okay. We look at this. We say 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. That's going to be my product. My sum is negative 3. The two numbers that multiply together that give me negative 10 are going to be negative 5 and positive 2. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. So I'm splitting this. So I have 2x squared minus 5x plus 2x minus 5. Okay, and x comes out of both of the first two terms, so I've got 2x minus 5. Then I don't have anything to come out of the 2x minus 5, so I have to write down the 1. So remember, you're pulling a 1 out. So I've got x plus 1 equals 2x minus 5. I set each one of them equal to 0. Okay, and so I have x equals negative 1. 2x equals 5, and so x equals 5 over 2. Okay, so my final answer here is negative 1 and 5 over 2. Okay, so for number 16, before I can do anything else with this, I need to FOIL n minus 2 and n plus 7. So I've got n times n, that's going to be n squared. N times 7 is 7n. Negative 2 times n is negative 2n. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Okay, at this point, now I can set everything equal to 0. So I have n squared plus 5n minus 14 equals negative 18. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides. So I have n squared plus 5n plus 4 equals 0. I can factor this. I am looking for two numbers multiplied together that give me 4 and added together give me 5. And those two numbers are 4 and 1. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. Now we can just go directly to writing those down because this value right here is 1. Okay? If this value right here in front of the n squared was anything other than 1, that's when we would have to split this term. So be sure you know when you've got to split this term and when you can just write them down directly. So now I do n plus 4 equals 0 and n plus 1 equals 0. So n equals negative 4 and n equals negative 1. So n equals negative 4 and n equals negative 1 are our solutions. Okay, so our last solving problem is x minus 5 equals x plus 1. X minus 5 equals x, or the square root of x plus 1. So it's very, very important that you look at this radical right here. The radical has got to be by itself. If it's not by itself, you cannot do anything with it until it is by itself. And this is by itself, so we're okay. But that is something that you've got to make sure that's alone before you do anything else. So I've got x minus 5 equals the square root of x plus 1. Okay, at this point, I'm going to square both sides. I have to do x minus 5 times x minus 5. I've got to square that. X minus 5 squared means x minus 5 times x minus 5. Okay, so I end up with x squared minus 5x plus 25. Okay, I've got to FOIL that. Okay, squaring a binomial means that you have to FOIL it. So I have x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals x plus 1. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 1x from both sides, and I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Okay, so I'm left with x squared minus 11x plus 24 equals 0. This factors nicely. I'm looking for two numbers added together give me negative 11. Multiplied together give me 24. And because this is 1, I can just write those numbers down. Okay? The two numbers are negative 8 and negative 3. Negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. Negative 8 times negative 3, or plus negative 3 is negative 11. I set each one of these equal to 0. Okay, and so I end up with x equals 8 and x equals 3. Now, it's very, 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 very important that we go back and check this because we could end up with an extraneous solution. So I'm going to check the number 8 first. So I have 8 minus 5 equals the square root of 8 plus 1. Okay, 8 minus 5 is 3. The square root of 8 plus 1 is the square root of 9. And so that works. So 8 is going to work. I also need to check 3 to see if it works. So I'm going to have 3 minus 5. And you may have been like, ooh, that's going to give me negative 2. And so right then you may have already been like, this is not going to work. But go ahead and take it. Take it the rest of the way. So I get 3 plus 1. That's the square root of 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. And negative 2 does not equal 2. So we have to throw that out. So our only solution to this is x equals 8.